The violin case at his feet told a story of two different lives. Antonio Tony Rossi, 71, sat in the fourth row of the Tonight Show studio, his calloused fingertips unconsciously moving through silent scales on his lap, muscle memory from 60 years of making music. The worn leather case beside his chair bore the scuffs of 25 years in New York subway stations, but hidden beneath those battle scars were fading gold letters. Juilliard School of Music, Class of 1975. What the bustling crowds hurrying through Grand Central and Times Square didn't know was that the quiet man with the weathered violin who played for their spare change had once performed at Carnegie Hall, had toured with the New York Philharmonic, had been hailed as one of the most promising classical musicians of his generation. Somewhere between the concert halls and the subway platforms, life had redirected Antonio's symphony into a solo that most people heard, but few truly listened to. The small subway musician's union pin on his faded jacket caught the studio lights as he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. After 25 years of underground performances, the MTA was finally honoring their street musicians with a special recognition ceremony, and somehow Tony had been selected to represent the hundreds of artists who brought music to the city's daily commute. What Tony didn't know was that someone had been paying attention to his music for years, someone who had recognized the sophisticated arrangements and classical training hidden within his subway performances. A young music student at NYU had been recording his playing and posting it online, and slowly, the classical music community had begun to whisper, "Is that Antonio Rossi? The Antonio Rossi who disappeared from the scene decades ago?" Tony's story had begun with such promise. Born to Italian immigrant parents in Brooklyn, he'd shown musical talent early, earning a full scholarship to Juilliard where he'd studied under masters and graduated summa cum laude. By 1980, he was the second chair violinist with the New York Philharmonic, living in a Manhattan apartment, playing the world's greatest concert halls, on track to become a conductor himself. But life had other plans. His wife Maria developed early-onset Alzheimer's at 42, requiring constant care that insurance barely covered. Tony had taken leave from the orchestra, then resigned entirely, burning through their savings on treatments that couldn't stop the disease's progression. When Maria passed in 1998, Tony found himself alone, broke, and unable to return to a classical world that had moved on without him. That's when he discovered the subway platforms. At first, it had been pure survival, playing for tips to pay rent on a studio apartment in Queens. But over the years, something magical had happened. The acoustics of the underground tunnels had become his new concert hall, the rushing commuters his audience, the rhythm of arriving trains his conductor's baton. He'd found a different kind of music in the city's underground heartbeat. For 25 years, Tony had played everything from Bach to Broadway, from Mozart to modern movie themes, adapting his classical training to the tastes of subway riders who dropped coins and dollars into his violin case. He'd played through 9/11, Hurricane Sandy, the 2008 financial crisis, and the COVID pandemic, becoming a constant in the lives of commuters who might not know his name but recognized his music as part of their daily journey. It was a Tuesday night taping in October, and Jimmy was in good spirits after interviewing a pop star about her upcoming tour. During his commercial break interaction with the audience, his attention was drawn to Tony by the violin case at his feet and the way he carried himself with a dignity that seemed at odds with his modest appearance. "Sir, I see you have a violin case there. Are you a musician?" Tony looked up, startled to be noticed in such a grand setting. "Yes, I play in the subway stations. Street musician, you might say." A warm murmur went through the nearby audience members. Street musicians had a romantic quality for many people, the image of artists choosing freedom over convention. "How long have you been playing in the subway?" 25 years, started at Grand Central. Now I play several stations depending on the day. It's been a good life." Jimmy noticed something in Tony's voice, a refinement, a careful way of speaking that suggested education and culture beyond what you might expect from a subway busker. "What kind of music do you play?" Tony's eyes lit up slightly. "Oh, everything really. Classical pieces for the morning commuters who appreciate something beautiful to start their day, popular songs for the younger crowd, movie themes that people recognize. You learn to read your audience, give them what they need to hear. It sounds like you really understand music, not just playing it, but the effect it has on people. Music is Music is a conversation. Even when you're playing alone, you're speaking to everyone who hears it. In the subway, you get 3 minutes with someone as their train arrives. 3 minutes to maybe make their day a little better, remind them that beauty exists even underground. The sophistication in Tony's answer caught Jimmy's attention. This wasn't the casual philosophy of a street performer. This was someone who understood music at a deeper level. Jimmy made a decision that would change everything. Tony, would you mind coming down here? I have a feeling there's more to your story than the subway performances. Tony looked uncertain, glancing at his violin case. I don't perform on stages anymore. Just come talk with us. Bring your violin if you'd like. As Tony made his way to the stage, carrying his worn violin case, the applause was polite but curious. When he reached the stage, Jimmy helped him up and guided him to a comfortable chair with a music stand nearby. Ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy announced, this is Antonio Rossi. For 25 years, he's been bringing music to New York's subway system. Tony, before we go further, can I ask, have you always been a street musician? Tony sat quietly for a moment, as if deciding how much of his story to share. No, not always. I had a different kind of musical life before. What kind of life? I was trained classically, Juilliard School of Music, class of 1975. I played with the New York Philharmonic for several years in the 1980s. A stunned silence fell over the studio. The audience was processing what they'd just heard. A former member of one of the world's most prestigious orchestras had been busking in subway stations for 25 years. The New York Philharmonic? Tony, that's incredible. What happened? How did you go from Carnegie Hall to Grand Central? Tony's voice grew quieter, more personal. Life happened. My wife got sick. Alzheimer's disease. The medical bills, the care she needed. I had to choose between my career and taking care of the woman I loved. There really wasn't a choice. The studio was completely silent now, understanding they were witnessing something profound. After Maria passed, I found myself displaced. The classical world had moved on. I was in my 50s, out of practice, with auditions and networking. But I still had my music, so I took it underground, literally. Jimmy leaned forward. Tony, you've been playing Juilliard-level classical music in subway stations for 25 years? Not just classical, I adapted. You learn what speaks to people rushing to work, heading home, traveling with their families. But yes, sometimes I play the pieces I used to perform with the orchestra. Sometimes a Bach partita echoes through those tunnels exactly the way it should. Jimmy reached behind his chair and pulled out a tablet. Tony, we did some research before tonight. We found this. He turned the tablet to show a video, Tony playing an elaborate violin arrangement of Winter from Vivaldi's Four Seasons in Times Square Station, commuters stopping to listen, some openly weeping at the beauty of the performance. This video has been viewed 2 million times. People in the comments are calling you the subway virtuoso and New York's hidden treasure. Tony looked stunned. I didn't know anyone was filming. There's more. We reached out to some music experts. Listen to this, from Sarah Chen, professor of violin at Juilliard. I've been watching videos of Antonio Rossi's subway performances for months. His technique is flawless, his musicality extraordinary. This is conservatory-level artistry being performed in public spaces. He's bringing world-class music to people who might never otherwise hear it. Jimmy continued, from the New York Philharmonic's current music director, Antonio Rossi was one of our most talented musicians in the 1980s. His decision to leave was a loss for the classical world. But what he's done since, bringing this caliber of music to everyday New Yorkers, is perhaps even more important. Tony's eyes filled with tears. They remember me. They do. In fact, Tony, there's something else. The Philharmonic wants to invite you to perform with them again. A special concert celebrating musicians who bring classical music to unconventional spaces. Tony sat in stunned silence, clutching his violin case. But first, Jimmy said, would you play something for us? Show us what 2.5 million subway riders have been hearing? With trembling hands, Tony opened his case and lifted out his violin. an instrument that had clearly seen better days, but was meticulously maintained. He tuned it carefully, the practiced motions of a master musician. "This is Ave Maria by Schubert," Tony said quietly. "I play this for people who look like they need something beautiful in their day." What happened next was pure magic. Tony began to play, and instantly the worn violin sang with a voice that filled the studio with heartbreaking beauty. This wasn't street performance. This was concert hall artistry, the kind of playing that only comes from decades of dedication to perfection. The studio fell completely silent except for the soaring melody. Audience members were openly crying, camera operators stopped their usual movement to listen. Even the production crew gathered in the wings to witness this unexpected concert. When the last note faded, the silence stretched for nearly a minute before the audience erupted in the kind of sustained applause usually reserved for the world's greatest concert halls. Jimmy had tears streaming down his face. "Tony, that's one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. How do you do it? How do you bring that level of artistry to a subway platform every day?" "Because music doesn't care where it's performed," Tony said simply. "A subway platform can be as sacred as Carnegie Hall if the music is honest, if it's played with love for the people who hear it." Jimmy stood and addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just witnessed something extraordinary. This man has spent 25 years proving that great art doesn't require great venues, it requires great heart." He turned back to Tony. "The classical music community wants to honor you. There's going to be a concert at Lincoln Center. Music for the people, celebrating musicians who bring art to unexpected places. Will you perform?" Tony nodded, overwhelmed. For Maria, she always said music should belong to everyone, not just people who can afford concert tickets. As they helped Tony back to his seat, he stopped and looked out at the audience one more time. "Thank you for listening, but I want you to know, every day there are artists performing in subway stations, on street corners, in small venues, bringing beauty to ordinary moments. Don't walk past too quickly. Sometimes the most extraordinary music is hiding in the most ordinary places." The episode that aired became one of the most viewed Tonight Show segments in history, launching Tony back into international recognition while maintaining his subway performances. The Lincoln Center concert sold out in minutes, with Tony performing both as a featured soloist and, for the final number, returning to his subway platform at Times Square, where he played for a crowd of thousands who gathered to hear New York's hidden treasure in his natural habitat. Tony continued playing in the subway 3 days a week, now often accompanied by classical music students who sought him out as a teacher. He split his time between underground performances and concert appearances, proving that there was no contradiction between high art and street performance. At 73, Tony still believes that music belongs to everyone, still plays for commuters who need beauty in their daily journey, and still carries his violin in the same worn case. A reminder that the most powerful performances happen not when we seek applause, but when we simply share our gifts with whoever needs to hear them. Because sometimes the greatest artists aren't the ones with the biggest stages, but the ones who understand that every moment is an opportunity to bring beauty into the world, one note at a time.